Thank you, thank you.
Make him feel welcome.
I always feel welcome here.
You always feel welcome?
I speak the language.
You speak the language. And I understand your language a bit.
There you go.
I told Stijn, once I was born in Brussels, a long, long time ago.
Amai.
And I lived in Grimbergen.
Grimbergen. It's a good beer as well, by the way.
Yeah, but I can't remember, but maybe I was too young that they had beer. I think that came later.
You start with milk, I know. That's what you do in the Netherlands, of course. We start with beer.
Yeah, and I lived next to a farmer who had made a Brussels loaf. I still don't like the stuff.
It's a very nice vegetable.
Hey, you're from Vectra AI, Stijn?
Yes, I am.
You're going to talk about identity has become the new zero-day vulnerability. But first, with Vectra AI, what are you doing? What's Vectra AI doing?
So Vectra AI is actually a company that builds technology that can find adversaries in your enterprise before they do real damage.
So on the proactive side.
One-line pitch.
I started this morning with the law of Sinterklaas.
The law of Sinterklaas.
And luckily Belgium is the only other country where they understand the Sinterklaas. Mm-hmm. What do you want to bring and what's your present for us today?
Yeah, I have a huge bag with me. Sant brings that with him, right? Yeah. So, no, I'm actually want to introduce on the way that today the modern attack is happening. We've heard a lot about vulnerabilities today and how you need to protect for that, and maybe you can prevent things from happening, but the problem is, staying in the Dutch theme maybe, it's cheese with holes in, right? Kaas met gaten, that is what we actually see today in enterprises. And whatever you do to fend your network, to fend your enterprise, to put walls up, there's always going to be a door open or a window open without having to break it. And how can you find them? Yeah, that is the question.
And today, that's on your slide as well, with Microsoft.
Yep.
We always think that everything is safe there, but it isn't.
I think Microsoft is a very good company to work with. Let us be very clear on that. But what I want to actually showcase here is that even companies like Microsoft that put a lot of investments in, first of all, building their own technology, secondly, also building security, and they do it very well. I think lots of seasoned people here in the room, when we talk about Defender like 15 years ago.
Old now? Or?
No, seasoned.
Oh, okay.
Seasoned means experienced.
Okay.
So when we talk about Microsoft security from, let's say, 15 years ago, we were hesitant to say, is that security? I think today we can agree they do a very good job, but sometimes you have things open, you have configurations done that are not even dangerous and you can't see it. And also they couldn't see it. Okay. And so the point I want to make, hopefully by the end of this talk, is that whatever measures you put in place, think about the fact that it is not always watertight. You really, really have to think twice sometimes. What are we doing? Do we think straight on the permissions, etc.?
And why are we doing it?
And sorry?
And why are we doing it?
And why are we doing it? Indeed, that's also important. Of course, I think why we do it is to make business and to do our own business, and to do that in a secure way.
Okay. Floor is yours, at least the stage.
Thank you so much.
Just to start off.
All right. So Vectra was born as a network detection response company, right? We were really focusing on the network about 10, 12 years ago, and we were embracing AI from day one, right? So that means we have 12 years of experiencing in using machine learning, data science, and the strange thing today is I have to explain to people that we do different things than Copilot and ChatGPT and LLMs are. And so these are the things we now all identify as the new AI. Often it's just an acceleration of things we were doing. We were searching already, we now do it more quickly, and we can ask the question, and it's transcripted into the search language. In the end, I may be making it too simple, but that is what it is. What we did is use AI, we say applied AI, to find intruders, adversaries in a network, and we expanded that to also cover the hybrid enterprise. That means not just your technical or logical network, computer network, but also to go into cloud and protect your assets in cloud. And today, what I would like to talk about is not the product itself, maybe very, very briefly in the end, because also, of course, Access 42 is using our technology to offer a really nice service to protect Microsoft environments, but I wanted to go back to what can happen to all of us. I'm not saying you, all of us. Could happen to Vectra, could happen to any company, right? Because this, for instance, is the example of Midnight Blizzard, and we have the friends of CrowdStrike here in the room, so they would say it's not they would say it's Cozy Bear, right? They give the threat actors nice names. And so what is about Midnight Blizzard? For those that do not know, I will not spend too much time here, but it's identified as a Russian foreign intelligence service that is also doing cyber station type of attacks or investigations. And of course, we know them mostly from SolarWinds. What they target is very often governments, technology and research, but also supply chain. And supply chain is actually what happened with SolarWinds, right? Impact another company that sells services to another company and actually come in that way. In the past, you had the HVAC companies that were compromised. Now it even happens on the software level. And then what they are very well known for is their highly sophisticated approach. And when we go down to the language of the adversaries, we talk about TTPs. I'm sure most of you know tactics, techniques, and procedures. This is also how MITRE is identifying all of those attacks, you could say, or components of the attacks, so that you can also dissect it your way, but also find maybe the behavior of such attackers in your network. And to just give you an example of how sophisticated they are is they just don't do a phishing email campaign. They go for spear phishing. What's the difference? With a phishing campaign, you go wide and you hope on a hit. With spear phishing, you go very specific and you target your message because it is created in the interest of the recipient. And so what they very often do is go like with embassy type of relations. They steal accounts, real accounts, use these accounts to go to the organizations that work, for instance, with an embassy, and actually do an update from the embassy as if it comes from there, and it actually comes from there because it's a legit email, but then they include malicious things, and people will just trust the source. They can't even see on the email address that it is forced. They will often open what's in there, and this is the way they can get in. And all of those affiliates and those ransomware groups, for instance, a lot of times they create the tooling, but they're no longer using it. They go and have their affiliates use the tooling. And very often, even a disgruntled employee can just go there, buy one Bitcoin, use that Bitcoin to register an internal email address or user with password, and it will spread into the ransomware gang. That's not what we're talking about today. Today, it's going to be about a very specific targeted attack. And you already got it. It was not just something that happened anywhere. It happened actually to major organizations. It happened to Microsoft and HPE, for instance. These were two organizations that at least came clean with it. They admitted that something had happened. A lot of other organizations most likely have been hit by Midnight Blizzard in the past. And this is not that old. This is still from this year. And what we will actually see is that, maybe I'm wrong, it actually started last year, but I'll come to that in a second. The important first takeaway from this is that there were no 0 days, no vulnerabilities, no malwares, no exploits involved. Am I here to advocate, to say you do not need to do vulnerability assessment, you don't need to do patching? Please do, right? The point I want to make is it will not be enough, right? Because on top of that, what we also see, and I'm not telling this, Microsoft is telling that 62% of their monthly authenticated users is still not using MFA. MFA has become the new standard, right? Even in the city of Antwerp, the mayor had to say, oh, maybe because of the attack, maybe I now should start using MFA. Only then each of those huge organizations starts to realize that you need to do it, but it is not enough. You can bypass MFA on top, right? SIM swapping and all of those things can happen. And last but not least, there was no endpoint interaction. So they did not take control of a machine and then build a tunnel, and from that tunnel control the machine. We detect that very well on the network. But in the cloud, it happens completely different. So it actually happens over APIs. So there is nothing really that you can do to fend that off with, for instance, preventive capabilities. And what Microsoft said was that the attack was not the result of a vulnerability. It was actually just the use of the regular product with the side effect of things that were probably misconfigured. So The products used were used as they were designed, right? So that is the things we need to think about, and that's why I wanted to bring this topic forward today. And let's start actually with looking into what this all was about. So, as I said, it happened actually last year. So, November 23, Microsoft became victim to this midnight blizzard gang, and actually only detected it on the 12th of January. So in other words, 1.5 months to detection. What do we hear today? Oh, attacks happen in seconds. No, this is still not true. The majority of attacks will happen in days, weeks, months, because you do not land on the critical asset from which you want to steal data, or from where you can plant ransomware in your network. That's not the reality. You will land somewhere, and you'll then have to find your way to the right privileges, to the right machines, to the right data, find a way to get that out, and only then, for instance, if it is about ransomware, detonate it. So there is plenty of time. I don't like to say that, but there is plenty of time. So in this case, what happened is that by accident reviewing actually the Exchange Web Services activity logs, they figured out something was wrong. So they did not have any alerts, not on their E5, not in their Sentinel, they had nothing. How can that happen, you think? They had to search for it. And so, more simple, I can't put it on the slide than this. I can't put it more simple than this on the slide. So Midnight Blizzard was attacking a cloud identity, and I will be introducing identity as something more than an account, right? And that is something we often forget about. And then from that identity, they can maybe manage applications. We publish applications in our organization with Entra ID, or we talked about Azure AD in the past, today Entra ID, and you do not authenticate those applications by user and password. Very often, we will be using OAuth for that. And that's going to be the key in this talk and into the way this happens. So through that mechanism of compromising an identity, escalating into an app, from there going to another tenant, I will explain that more in detail, they could actually access the data like in M365 or at Microsoft found even source code. So this nice animal is going to be filled with dots. And as you can see, there is 2 colors of dots. I'm in front of it, but there's a purple one and there is an orange one. And that's super important because we're going to introduce the concept of boundaries, trusted boundaries between tenants in Microsoft. And so the takeaway from this already is don't treat your test environment as test, treat it as production. Protect it, configure it as production if it is publicly facing, because otherwise you will have these type of things. So what happened in this case, the attacker could actually breach the Microsoft environment with a password spray. Very simple. They had found legitimate accounts and had been trying these accounts, not just rogue accounts, known accounts. And they did it so low and slow that they never hit the threshold of disabling the account automatically. So all of the detections of suspicious login from here or there or multiple failed logins, none of them was firing. On top of that, they used local proxies, residential proxy services. So they mimicked the connection from that user to be coming from the user's normal place. So also the impossible travel type of detections never fired because it came as if it was local for that user. So they found a way in, and from there, they actually compromised a test account in the Entra ID, and with that account could log on into the, you can see purple tenant, into the test tenant. In that test tenant, what they found was an application that was there. And it turned out that the permissions, we call that also privileges they had, were quite high to manage that application. So they actually could change the secret of that application to own it, to control it from their end. And that's where it all started to go sideways, because from there, they could start authenticating to a different tenant. And I'm going to visualize this for you, because first time I was reading the slide, I was like, nice, all of those dots, but what does it really mean? So I think we should, first and above all, ask ourselves the question, when we try to protect for such a thing, we know password spray is there, we know privilege abuse is there, can we detect it? question is then, can we detect that if the authentication is not a user account, but an application with OAuth? So first, we couldn't detect it because it was low. Secondly, can you authenticate, can you find an authenticated app, for instance, with OAuth certificates or secrets? No, unless you enable additional diagnostic screening and detections in your Microsoft environment, which is not often done. And why is that not? Because each application that is authenticating programmatically in your environment will create a log. You will die by logs, and you will not find it. That's why it's not enabled. But that's a problem, right? And that's one of the reasons why we saw this type of attack happening. Okay, now we know what that is on the application level. What was the next thing? Was trying to get the privileges of that application elevated. And you see here that I'm already in the production tenant. So what does that mean? What is an application that we can publish in an environment? And the easiest is to look at the right-hand side here of the screen. So when you create, as an organization, an application, you're going to register that. And that registration is going to be in the tenant where you build it. Typically, in this case, the test tenant. And you will authenticate from then on that application with OAuth rather than with a user account. That application, when you publish it, it will have a global representation. So you could say, who of you has been a programmer? Many programmers? Have you been working like with object-oriented programming languages, right? That you can build from a machine, or I must say, from a car, you can build a bus. From the bus, you can build a truck, right? By just using the original component and then add new things to it. It's exactly like that. You register the app, global represented, and then you actually create automatically, in the original tenant, a new local app. And you can make a copy of that app with all of the privileges that you assign to it, and copy that into another Entra ID tenant that is trusted. So actually this one here, I was looking for the pointer, this one here is actually a representation of that app published in the test tenant. You start to see the link already, right? You do something wrong in the test tenant, you don't know about all of the privileges you actually gave that app, and then it gets published into the second tenant. Okay, if it is only the privileges that was assigned to that app, it's all good. But what happened in this case is that you have to look at how do the permissions on the app work. So you can give it a role, this application can only do this, and you shield it off. Or you're going to give it API permissions. Why would you give an app API permissions? I think a lot of apps have it. Graph API, rings a bell. You want to have all the apps talk to the other apps over the API from Microsoft. So you're giving them rights, otherwise they cannot talk to each other. So you're going to programmatically give it permissions, either delegated, which are representing the user, or you're going to give the app rights themselves, where they can log in with, right? So this is where things become a little bit tweaky and difficult, because what is now an identity? You remember I said I'm going to explain an identity that is more than a user account. Actually, in Microsoft language, we will not talk about identity, we will talk about principal. Service principal, for instance, that could be actually an application. But it also could be a user, it could be a group, right? All of these things exist, but that means even that a service principal equaling app can give permissions to another service principal, another app. Here it starts to become interesting. And you could say, okay, still not bad, because before I can give those privileges to another app, I have, as an administrator, to consent with that. I have to agree with that. I have to approve that. So, nothing wrong, because before I can do this, I have, of course, my administrator who is safeguarding my enterprise and will not approve consent without knowing what's happening. We agree? That's the theory. Because what happened in this environment is, and we're visualizing it again, the password spray got access on the account, we found the legacy app on which we had control, and we found more privileges. We could or that attacker could find a way to publish it into the production tenant, and then that's all fine. But elevation of privileges is also what happened. So, hey, nothing wrong. The administrator is going to safeguard me. No, because we also have this. We have privileges that sometimes are assigned that go over the API. So in this case, that app was granted the permission, app role assignment, read, write all. Read, write all. What means global admin, right? So that app had it. So I don't need an admin because the service principal can be an app, right? That app has the rights. I can grant my own publication of the app. That is exactly what happened here. So instead of having the admin come up and say, okay, I review it, fine, all good, we approve, no. The app could approve itself. And now you had elevated privileges in the production tenant, right? And now actually hell is loose because from here I have my contact and my access into the production tenant. I have privileges, right? So what I can do now, and let me give it away because I already said we are dissecting it. So it happened, right? It was successful. So next step was new user created. From there, we use the same tricks over and over again, or they. I always say we. We protect, we don't do it. But sometimes I'm passionate and then I talk about we. No, they elevated the privileges, created a new app. I'm going to visualize that again because the original app was not being really useful, but they had privileges to do new stuff. And that's what actually happened. So that new app was created and a new consent was done on that app. Of course, we have the privileges and we gave it the permission to be an app that can log in into M365. So, as of now, I can log in, get my email, get all the data in SharePoint, use Copilot. If it is enabled, a lot of companies will disable it because so many things can go wrong with that, but it's a different thing. You have disabled it? I'm dissecting the attack. We'll come back to what we could have seen, but Microsoft didn't see it because this is what happened, right? And so the secret to the app was created and they had access to the emails. I will go a bit more quickly over this, but just to recap what I was explaining there, we had the app. We have it now published to the production tenant. You're still with me? We have elevated privileges, so we could create that account. Right? Still with me? When I now have that account, as an attacker, I go back to my test tenant, because I have a lot of privileges there. I create a new app, and with that app, I'm actually going, the threat actor, TA, threat actor, is creating that, is registering it. I have now my user account who can consent that app with the new privileges, and I can publish it as a service principal for the malicious app. Service principal was a copy of the global representation of that app. I'm talking about a lot of new things, and I try to repeat, right? So I hope it's still clear on where we are. And so we have it now consented, and in the end, what now happened is that by creating a new secret, we have the control, we have now full access as an app into the environment, and here is the full scenario that you probably can read later on when you have access to this slide. So all in all, a lot of things could go wrong, and this is exactly what happened. You asked a question. I'm going to give you an answer, if you don't mind. So question is, where was the SOC? That was the question. So the SOC was there, but they had not enough indicators to take an action. And this is where, as Vectra, we have come a long way. We started off with the concept of IDS. So a lot of the people at Vectra, including me, we worked with Juniper Networks back in the days. We had a very well-known IDP product, intrusion detection prevention product. Was very competitive with SourceFire, and you could see a lot because you had signatures. But today, you're not enough. You're not covering enough with signatures. So this is where it all started. And those people said, like, okay, the problem why we didn't find it in the SOC was all of those events coming into the scene, thousands, sometimes millions of lines. We know from studies, from our own studies, as well as third-party studies, that maybe 40% of those alerts actively can be searched as well as processed. Of those 40, you probably will miss a lot because it's dumb things. It's always the same. You will miss things. And then you have 60% that was not worked. So that's also already the problem today of the SOC. We said, no, not looking at alerts, look at indicators, bring those indicators together into one detection. So if you see the port scan over and over again, don't create one, but 10, create one with 10 instances. And if you see on the same compromised host or account another activity, TTP, remember, happening, bring that together, and only now announce the importance of that account or machine to be investigated. That is bringing alerts into tangible detections that you can work and maybe find the incident. So here were all the steps that happened by the attacker, the threat actor. What could we have done if Vectra was used in the Microsoft environment? The password spray would have been detected, even though it was not disabling the accounts. So technically, you can create an analytic rule in Sentinel that potentially can find it, and probably now a lot of SOCs have been doing that because that's the way they work. They learn from the past attacks. We had it out of the box. The brute force, how slow and low it happens, we keep on monitoring it. And we see the threshold increase, not maybe at the same time, but over time. We would have alerted for that. Secondly, creating a new secret is not something you do normally, right? So that is another observation we have. We know what is the normal behavior. We don't look at the event itself, we look at the behavior. So we would have probably said, strange, why do you create a new secret? That's probably because of redundant access that you want to create. Secondly, when you're going to register an application or you're going to elevate privileges, that's going to trigger operational anomalies because normally that app never did that before, right? So it's more than only saying never did it before. It's learning really about what happens in the network, or in this case in the SaaS. That's why we apply the AI, okay? OAuth application, suspicious use of it. Again, more operational anomalies. Admin account created. Why would an app create an admin account, right? So if that is not done normally, you would always want to see an alert for that. So we fire that alert, again, redundant access, and then finally suspicious OAuth again, because it's a new app authenticating over and over again in those environments. So the point I want to make is there are a lot of detections you can do within your Microsoft environment, and most of the time you will have, for instance, the suspicious logins and the brute forces that happen that are higher level, so meaning more aggressive, you will see it. But everything that goes under that needs creation of rules, analytic rules in Sentinel, will be hard. That's where we come to the rescue. That's how we have been helping Access 42 as well, to maintain coverage of everything what happens by building the models, those rules, into the product that they use to read the log files from Microsoft. And so, to conclude, I'm not sure how I'm doing on timing, but I hope I'm okay. I have 2 more slides. What is it that Vectra does? We have a platform. Today I've been talking about what happens as an attack, also shown what we could see. That is the surface of cloud. But the surface of cloud is also network that you need to cover, and you need to also cover your IaaS. But on top of that, we also implemented different levels of AI. AI to detect a behavior, but also if you find, for instance, command and control type of behavior, it doesn't mean it's bad at all times. It also could be your vulnerability scanner, actually, that is probing the network and is asking feedback of a scan of the machine. That you need to filter out. So we have also AI to filter out the benign use of potentially abusable behaviors. And then thirdly, bring that all together, alert the machine. And we can use signatures as well. So if you have suricata rules, we run on the same sensor for the network, suricata, so you can run threat hunting exercises without having to jeopardize the AI coverage. We think like an attacker, so finding the needle in the haystack, that is the AI we apply here. And then, of course, once you have found something, maybe you need to disable that account in Entra ID or in the Active Directory, or you might need to isolate a machine and ask the EDR to do so, or interact with your firewall and block it there. And then, of course, you have a service that can go over it, and that is exactly what we built together with Access 42. I can quickly skip this slide, as I kind of already talked about it. We discussed today identity and cloud detections, but you also have to cover the rest, network, data centers, correlation of the cloud and the network identity. So that same identity that could be used in Entra ID probably is also an account in Active Directory. And if you can take control of the account in the cloud, very often you have also control locally. So you also could do something on machines, right, That's also important to keep in mind. You need to bridge them and stitch them together. It's not enough only to look at cloud or only to look at the network. So, with that, I hope you have a bit of an understanding of how things can go wrong without vulnerabilities, purely on identity. I don't want to scare you. Make sure you properly configure it. Do it on your test tenant as well, and apply Vectra. Thank you.
This is weird. You said, I don't want to scare you. Everyone who's talking about security is always trying to scare their audience.
But if Sinterklaas is around, you always have to be scared, right?
You always have to be scared. That's the main way of selling your products, is make everybody scared. We're getting back in time. I'm really lucky. You did a shorter presentation than we expected, so we just have a break after this, but not before. At least we have some questions for Stijn. I'm sorry. Just go. You're taller than I am. I already see. Now stay down, because then the rest can see you, Harold.
I'm curious.
Harold
Inen. I'm curious. Omgeving. You can't translate that in English.
No, I can't. Omgevingsdienst Noordzee-kanaalgebied.
That's a lot of words.
We'll ask you later what you're doing, but
that's perfect.
Just come up with your question.
We'll have to ask Siri or so.
Yeah, because serious question. What did Microsoft with it?
Sorry, what did?
Microsoft after this.
What did they do?
With this info.
With this information. Did you tell them?
Of course, they know, and they have, of course, been explaining also what happened on their environment. So I'm pretty sure that they have taken actions in their SOC to write the right correlation rules. But I do not believe that they immediately could adapt their products to detect it automatically. It's a lessons learned, and that's what I think I gave that away as well. SOCs will learn from attacks that happened, and they will apply, you could say, the playbook that they have seen unfolding. They will create new searches for that. They will create new investigations for that. But what you need also to take into account is like, okay, now this tactic will probably no longer work, but there's going to be plenty of other tactics that are not automatically being picked up.
And you don't have to learn with your own SOC, but crises that happen somewhere else will also be available for you.
Yep.
Never waste a good crisis, we say. Don't we? I see another hand there. I'm not going to run. Take your time. Would you please stand up, Adia?
Sure. I'm Madi from Travix. Generally, how long does it take for, let's say, Vectra or any other AI to understand the baseline of any company?
It's a very good question, because indeed we work with the ML, the AI. You need to learn what is the normal behavior in a network. I need to go back to two things to introduce these, to actually give a full answer to your question. So I pointed out that we use data science. Data science is what a lot of people think of, like you give a model pictures of a cat, give them pictures of a dog, and after 20 million times seeing a dog and a cat, they can predict what the next picture is, that it is a dog or a cat. Yeah. That is observed learning or pre-learning models. So you actually teach them, supervised learning. We have quite a few of those models. That's the first answer. So things like detecting command and control, both in the cloud as well as on-premise, with network, will probably fire quite quickly because we know how the pattern works, no learning required. But then you have the unsupervised models that need to understand how does a machine typically interact with a service and what account is used to do that interaction. We say typically between 10 and 14 days is the good time to get a good understanding, but it's never exact because it really depends on how busy is that network, right? If that user only logs in once every month, it's not going to be learned, right? So you need to have enough activity to get that baseline right. And then thirdly, I said two things, but there's also the signatures that you can apply, Suricata driven, that of course fire as well. Does that answer your question? Welcome.
No more questions. You told the full story, Stijn. Give a hand of applause to Stijn then. Thank him very much.
Thank you.
I'm in dubio at this moment.